Welcome to Fun and Fundraising, everybody, the podcast where we talk with people behind top events to showcase how they positively transform the communities they serve. I'm your host, Rob Giardinelli, and today I have two really fun special guests on. So we have Rick Byrd, who is the Executive Director of BreakThrough T1D for the South Texas region, along with Ali Bruskoff, who is the co-chair of the upcoming Promise Ball benefiting BreakThrough T1D. And BreakThrough T1D has been around for a while, but they are, and one of the things we're going to talk about today is successful rebranding of an organization. For many, many years, this organization was previously known as the Juvenile Diabetes Research Fund, also known as JDRF. So we're going to talk about how this organization was able to successfully pivot and rebrand. And last year's Houston Promise Ball raised well over $2 million and was highly successful. And we know it's going to be just as successful this year. So we've got two really good seasoned pros here. So I'm really excited to talk with them. So Rick, Ali, I'm just so excited you're both here today. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for
Thank
having
you.
us.
Glad to be here.
Absolutely. So, Rick, tell us about what the mission of BreakThrough T1D is.
Yeah, Rob. So the mission of organization, unlike our name, hasn't changed for 54 years, 55 years now. And that is simply stated to improve lives today and tomorrow by accelerating life-changing breakthroughs to cure, prevent, and treat type 1 diabetes and its complications. Stated another way, as our purpose statement mentions, is we're driving towards those cures. And while we're doing that, we're helping those living with this disease stay healthy so that they'll benefit from those cures when that day comes.
Fantastic. And and we'll get into the rebranding piece in a minute, but I'm glad you mentioned that the mission has remained the same, even though the name has changed slightly. And we'll kind of talk about what, how that all came to be. And before we talk about the rebrand, I always like asking this question of guests because everyone gets involved with organizations in different ways. And I'd love for each of you to share how each of you initially have gotten involved with the organization. Ali, I'd like for you to start, and then Rick, I'd like for you to share how you initially got involved with BreakThrough T1D.
Yeah, absolutely. So about 5.5 years ago, my older daughter at the time was 10 years old, and she was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. And we did not have it in our family. We really knew nothing about the disease. It was a total out of left field, a real shock to us. It also coincided with about 5 days before COVID took over Houston. So we were in the hospital and we were leaving the hospital, and the nurses were talking about a epidemic or a pandemic or a virus that was taking over their friends that were nurses in New York, and that it was coming to Houston. And we were so in our bubble that of dealing with a diagnosis of type 1 diabetes that I didn't even process it. Lo and behold, 5 days later, the entire city shut down. So it was a really unique time to be diagnosed with an uncured autoimmune, as well as the entire world kind of shutting down. So that being said, fast forward, it took us about 2 years, but I do to get involved with BreakThrough T1D. We just needed time and settle in and kind of understand this new norm. But I do remember from day one, BreakThrough reaching out to us, and I always knew about them that they were support and they were kind, and they're like, we're here for you. We are your first stop if you need anything. And then fast forward about 2 years, a girlfriend put me in touch with another woman whose daughter was diagnosed with type 1 a year after my daughter, Georgie. And they were about the same age, and we started connecting, and she had kind of gotten more involved sooner with BreakThrough. And she's like, you really need to come to a gala. You really just need to see what they're doing. Dip your toes in. It's not what you think it's going to be. It's going to be meaningful. And we went with her as her guest. And from that day forward, I was like, this is really an incredible safe space of like-minded people that are really rallying towards a cure and supportive. And I just felt like we had to get involved.
Wow, that's talk about, you're kind of in your own bubble of dealing with stuff, and then you had kind of the big bubble of COVID all around you. So it was almost like you were the core of the earth and the rest of the earth was kind of revolving and shutting down around you. That is That is such a harrowing story, but it's great to see that, you all as a family unit have been able to move on and march forward and, leading you to your involvement with this organization. So that's one of the more unique stories I've ever heard about someone getting involved. I don't know, I don't think I've ever talked to anybody who had a diagnosis of something that wasn't COVID right before COVID. That is fascinating, and that shows that, things can get diagnosed really at any time. And Rick, tell us how you initially got involved with BreakThrough T1D.
Yeah, so I've been in nonprofit fundraising world my entire career. So 25 plus years, although I don't feel that old. And so I was fortunate one day to get a call to say, hey, we have an opportunity. Would you be interested in talking? And well, I don't have a direct family connection to the disease, at least immediate. We did have some friends here in Houston whose children were living with type 1 diabetes. And so we knew about the organization. I did have a childhood friend who we played baseball together, and he was diagnosed when had just returned from a baseball tournament that my mom had driven us to, and come back, and my mom calls his mom and says, hey, I'm noticing these symptoms. And lo and behold, they took him to the hospital, and he was diagnosed with then what everybody called juvenile diabetes, which we now call type 1 diabetes.
I'm glad you brought
And
that
Rob,
up.
if we could add a comment to what Allie shared, I think it's just an important thing to note. She mentioned that nobody in her family, right, had a history of this. And we're seeing about 90% of all new diagnoses have no type 1 history. They may have other autoimmune diseases in the family, but no type 1. And so a lot of times people think it's just a genetic disease. Nobody in my family has it, but like any autoimmune, and we're seeing them rise and spike everywhere, it could hit anyone at any time, at any age. And that's the other part of this, is that it's not just a childhood disease. It affects both adults and children.
I'm glad you brought that piece up, and it actually kind of leads really nicely into my next question, and that is about how you rebranded as BreakThrough T1D. And I have to assume that part of that is that, I think people associate the late Mary Tyler Moore often with this organization, and she got diagnosed with it in her 30s, I believe. I think she was in her mid 30s when she was diagnosed. So it totally, like when you made the name change, it was like, oh, well, that totally makes sense given that I've known adults who have gotten diagnosed with it as well. So talk about, how and why the organization decided now was the time to rebrand, and what advice you would give on messaging a brand name change to somebody who's changing their own brand name into the nonprofit community.
Sure. Well, first, the disclaimer is we have an amazing marketing department who spent really years on this project. And going back to 1970, when the organization was founded by two moms who happened to be in the two cities where Allie and her husband come from, started the organization, there was a lot that wasn't known about the disease. And again, at the time, people equated it to kids. And so as time went on and research happened, more and more awareness was brought forward. That's when we realized that as many adults are being diagnosed every year as there are minors. And now, of course, as kids grow up and get older, there's way more adults that live with this disease. And so for years, the organization has been trying to figure out a way, how do we change the misnomer that this is a kid's disease? And one of the barriers to that was that it's right there in our name, juvenile. And so it's one of those things, I think for any name change, any brand change, it's got to be the right time under the right circumstances. And we've had a change in CEO leadership back in around 2018, 19, in that time frame. And with that came just a different energy, a different vantage point, a different vision. Our CEO today, he's living with type 1 diabetes. He's a microbiologist, and he runs the world's largest nonprofit focused on this. So he sees this from multiple lenses. We were also coming out of COVID, starting to see some positive traction, getting back to kind of, what our normal world looked like. And our board, international board, made a decision, this is the time to do it. And so we had a new marketing director who had a background in this, and literally years of studies went into this, lots of surveys. And one of the biggest telling points I think justified the name change from juvenile diabetes to BreakThrough T1D was that around 45 to 50% of adults living with type 1 diabetes did not see JDRF as relevant. And yet everything we're doing is helping them live healthier lives, and one day is going to get them to a cure. So the change BreakThrough T1D came about because the breakthrough really defines everything that we do. The breakthroughs that come through research, the breakthroughs in our advocacy work. So we have volunteers and staff who spend countless hours working with our elected officials to influence spending for research, to designate money that goes to the NIH that helps fund type 1 research. And then at the local level, what you heard from Ali was the breakthroughs of when that family or that adult gets the diagnosis. They all tell you, I felt alone, isolated, in Ali's case, really isolated. And so then we have a legion of volunteers who reach out to kind of put their arms around those who are diagnosed to say, you're going to be okay. Here's who we are. Here's what we can do. How can we help? And so all along the way, there's those breakthroughs that are happening. And then the T1D, which obviously stands for type 1 diabetes, wasn't in our name. And there was a lot of questions like, oh, type 2, type 1. And so we really wanted to separate ourselves, that we are focused intently on curing type 1 diabetes. And with that said, a lot of the advantages and advancements that have come through with type 2 have also come through our research. So continuous glucose monitors and pumps that you see type 2s wearing now, they started as a research project in 2005 that we funded initially. So that's really kind of how it happened. And then as it rolled out, it was really you've heard the term culture of philanthropy. It took everybody to get this word out. It wasn't just paid media or local media. It was our volunteers spreading the message. It was our staff having those conversations. And that's one of the biggest, I think, advantages this name change has brought about, is that it's allowing us to retell our story or tell it for the first time. And so it's been very exciting, and it's been, let's say, mostly well received, right? I mean, with any change, there's people that deal with it differently. But I think for the most part, once you share why, then most people get on board and understand. And at the end of the day, as I said earlier, what didn't change is why we're here and what we're doing and what our goal is.
Wow. And, I'm glad you brought up the part that, part of the reason for the rebrand was 45% of the people who were afflicted with T1D didn't think it was a resource that they could necessarily tap into. So any dissent that you may have gotten obviously was made up, in terms of ROI. Whenever you make a brand change, you got to weigh the pros and the cons. But in your case, you could very clearly tell you did the research. That's why it's great you have a researcher as CEO to really, go through the process and be like, this is going to help a lot more people. And yeah, it may alienate some. And as you said, with change, that's always just part of it. But at the end of the day, it allowed you to retell your story and propel the brand brand forward. And, there's multiple different ways of, getting the word out. And, one of them is the reason we're here today. And that is, the promise ball that is coming up. So, Ali, I'd love, from an event chair's perspective, talk about what the keys are to having a successful relationship with a nonprofit so that you feel that your vision of the event is being carried out.
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, it's a huge honor to be asked to be the gala chair. So my husband and I were very excited to be asked to do it and take it really seriously. We want this to be a very special, memorable, exciting, and fresh kind of take on what the Promise Ball is and what it can be. I think starting off with the beginning, and by the way, the team at BreakThrough is so strong and organized, and that was a real convincer for us to do it, because we knew that we had such great support and they're so successful already that it was, kind of just were the icing on this well-made cake. I think clear defined roles and goals is really a great way to start. I want to know exactly what is expected of me. As the gala chair, I want to know what are some of the features of the past, Promise Balls that have been successful that we want to take forward, and what are some areas that I have some wiggle room to work with my team to bring a fresh take on it, and yet still keep the intention and the emotional connection that the Promise Ball is so successful at. And also just collaborate and communicate. We have set communications. We have, it starts off every other week on a Wednesday, and then it goes down to once a week, having this built in time. And then of course there's a million emails in between, but that we know that we can come together, problem solve, brainstorm, and really have each other's back, I think is just the way you have to do it.
Very well said. And being given the latitude and understanding your roles and goals, and that needs to be a hashtag. That was actually I love that slogan. But the organization setting the clear guidelines as to what the event chair is expected of the event chair, because every organization expects different things from event chairs. There is no one playbook. I wish there was, but there is not, because every event chair's skill sets are different, and every single organization has a different structure, a different vision, a different fill in the blank or whatever it is. So I'm really glad that you brought that piece in. And Rick, I'd love for you to share, how do you all as an organization go about identifying and selecting chairs for an event each year? What is your, talk about the strategy of doing that as an organization.
Yeah. Well, when you have people like Allie and Rich, it makes it easy to identify those people. But we, as a staff team, and then working with our board leadership, we have a pipeline. We have individuals that we've identified that we think at some point in time could chair a successful gala. And for some people, they're closer to that time than others. But what allows us to do is start putting them in places and positions that start preparing them. And we also look at, with any chair, do they have the bandwidth to lead our largest fundraising event? Do they have the passion for the mission? Do they have the willingness to reach out into their network of individuals? And so all those things go into that decision. With Allie and Rich, they've jumped right in the last few years, and Allie is somewhat famous here locally in Houston now because she started an event 2 years ago called Mahjong for a Cure. And at the time when she brought it to us, we were like, yeah, that'd be great. A nice little Mahjong event. And lo and behold, 2 years later, it's raised almost $400,000 after 2 events. So that rose her quite to the top pretty quickly. But no, they bring such high energy. And then I think, as we'll see this year in the ballroom, we always want to keep the room fresh. We want people who come year over year. We don't want it to get stale. And I think what we're going to see with Allie's energy and taste, and she's going to bring really some fun elements and a different feel to the room that I think people who come for the first time are going to be wowed, and those who have been here for 15, 20 years are going to also be blown away.
Very well said. And I've actually got follow-up questions with each of you. I'm going to go first to Allie. And Allie, one of the things is, creating those wow moments. And a lot of that has to do with the theme. So talk about how, and I know that in most cases, the event chair has a hand in that, in not just executing the theme, but in many cases selecting the theme. So talk about how you all selected this current year's theme, and talk a little bit about it.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things for the Promise Ball, one of the kind of stipulations is it has to be a black tie event, and which is fabulous. And I think it totally leans into our Saturday night gala. But I really love the idea of glamour in old Hollywood. And I'm from New York, and I thought it'd be fun to really lean in on that black and white kind of Truman Capote, elevated, really kind of fun fare. I love the idea of dressing up, but I also think that oftentimes when you ask guests to dress up, it's fun for the first hour, and then it starts to feel a little costumey, and you suddenly start to see pieces of their costume on the table, and everyone's feeling a little bit like out of themselves. So I thought this sort of theme, men can wear a tux of their kind, ladies can lean in, but I'm sure everybody has something already in their wardrobe that would work for those that just want to, attend and feel like themselves. I think that it also speaks to the sophistication of BreakThrough T1D. It's a very all-encompassing event, and it brings in people from all different types, all different families and backgrounds. And that's truly what kind of the Truman Capote party was. It was a mix of interesting people with different experiences coming together that were all unified by something. So I kind of like that as a representation. And it also marks the 60th anniversary of his party of the century. So I think there's a lot of tie-in. And even as I was doing more research, I really like to find like a significance. He was born, his birthday is the same day as my daughter's birthday, who it's after. It just feels like it could be really fun to play with and gives us a lot of options. So that's where we're at.
Okay, it was almost like that was meant to be. And Truman Capote's Party of the Century, also known to many as the Black and White Ball. I mean, it really is find a documentary on it, find books on it, because there's all kinds of things. It's really one of the most fascinating events that was ever done by anybody. So I love that your tie from that you're from New York, that you kind of grew up. I grew up outside of Philadelphia, and even there, that was part of the cultural zeitgeist, was that people knew what that was, even as a little kid, even if they weren't alive then, like we weren't alive when that happened, but we still knew exactly what it was. That was really cool. I loved hearing that story. And Rick, my follow-up for you is you had mentioned something about whether it's the first time or the 15th time someone's attended the gala. So what are things that a person or organization can do to create that devoted following so that there are people that are attending the gala every single year, 10 times, 15 times, or even more than that?
Yeah, that's a great question. And something we talk about every year, right? It's like we got to make sure that those who come every year leave feeling great and fun and refreshed and feeling something new. And so I think that just goes to creating a fresh experience every year. We have, like a lot of galas, we have some mainstay activities that people really look forward to. And we've actually talked about in the past, like maybe it's time to sunset that element of the gala. And then people are like, well, no, we can't get rid of that. And so we keep the things that work and try to enhance them in ways. And so a good example is our post party always has casino tables, right? So this year we're looking at how do we incorporate maybe mahjong right into this, and so it's not just fake gambling and all that good stuff. The same thing with like the band. It's not the same band every year. Keeping it fresh, knowing who your audience is. So we want people to leave the night not only feeling like they helped a successful gala, but they had a lot of fun. And I will tell you, before I even came to BreakThrough, I had friends that would come to the JDRF gala who had no connection to the disease, and they would tell us it's the best party in town. And they're like, we go to a lot of galas. We have more fun at this gala than we do at others. And so whether that's true for everybody, I don't know, but I'd like to think it is. I think the other thing too is stewardship. So people are coming and we're raising, last year we raised $2.5 million. We raised over 11 million since COVID just in this event alone. And, we make sure that everybody who gives at any level is thanked appropriately and meaningfully. And because we hope those dollars come back to us in some form or fashion the next year, whether it's at the gala or hopefully using that as an entry point to maybe light somebody's fire and hopefully they'll become a raving fan for us and continue to support in meaningful ways. And then the last thing is, the reason everybody, at least most people are there, is to drive dollars to our mission. And so we try to capture during the evening, before the event, after the event, the ways that event impacts that mission. And so that we do that through storytelling, through some videos, through our speakers. And then post-event, we have kids, and now we'll have adults living with type 1 diabetes who will send some thank you videos, just thanking our key sponsors for their support. So it's just always tying everything back to the root, and that's our mission.
Okay, I've got a follow-up question for you, Rick, but I want to ask Ali something first, and
All right.
and that is kind of about event committees, because a lot of what Rick just kind of mentioned there, a lot of that kind of happens through subcommittees, and I kind of want to kind of talk about how that's laid out. And for you, how, like bringing up something like Mahjong. And Mahjong, everybody, is basically pickleball is the new outdoor sport everybody is playing, and Mahjong is the new indoor sport that everybody is playing. So they're kind of the two rock star things of the moment. So props on you for seeing that and, finding another fundraising event that's raising six figures, each year. That's incredible. But I want you to share a little bit with us, Allie. Talk about the importance of that, having that strong event committee that helps you bring your vision of the event to life.
So I think I'm probably not the way I approach my host committees, if you want to call them, or event committees. I think I'm probably a little unique, and this may not work for everyone, but I really like to use social media. I feel really comfortable speaking. I have a few different accounts, a personal account, one for Mahjong, and then I have a work account for my fashion business. So between all those accounts, I just put it out there. I'm really honest. Hey guys, this is what I'm doing. I'd love you to be part of it. If it looks like something that you'd be interested, please DM me. This is what the requirements that I'm asking. I really like it to come from them. It feels much more organic. I'm not like going out, hey, would you mind? Is it, then it comes. And I mean, this is the third host committee that we formed this way, and it's been really successful. Everyone contributes from a kind of a different standpoint. I try to keep my host committees really positive. It's a camaraderie, really grateful for them. Very minimal requirements when it comes to time. I really want them to spread the word. If they have auction items that are significant, hopefully attend if they can. That's really all. That the rest we can handle. They are my mega pieces into social circles that I may not be connected to, and they're there to kind of be our hype guys and help out. They're amazing in every way, but I like to keep it coming from them. And then it seems like very successful, and the excitement, and it's worked for me. So I don't know if that's.
I actually think it's a brilliant idea for you to do this, and here's why. Because you're bringing social media into it, one, you're able to talk passionately about the organization because it personally affects you and your family. But, the second thing, and the thing that I think is just really, 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 really cool about it, is social media allows you to bring new people in. And the one thing that keeps an event going is it cannot be the same exact people throwing the same exact party every single year. And social media algorithms change all the time, and what pops up on your feed, like with LinkedIn, it's like every 6 months there's a completely different algorithm as to what shows up prominently in your feed. You're going to get different people every year, and I wish more organizations took that approach. I love that you're using that as a base for your approach. I would say for other organizations, start small with it. See if it responds to your audience. And I know Rick was talking about audience earlier. See if they respond to it. And if it does, that can really be a good conduit for bringing new people in that can bring in big auction items or potential major donors or whatever those are. So I really think it's a brilliant strategy that you're doing that.
We've gotten, not to interrupt, but we've gotten so many, like for Mahjong for a Cure, donations from people, like very significant, high value donations from people just saying, hey, I see what you're doing. I can't attend, but is this something that you think would work in your auction? Because we had a live auction, and I look at it, I'm honest. I'm like, hey, that's so generous. It's not for us. I don't want to be wasteful. I'm very respectful of what people are willing to donate. But when those items come in, I'm like, okay, thank you. Yes, please. And I've made a lot of friends that are talking about mutual things about our children and how we can help each other. It's wonderful. Social media, I think if it works for you and your organization and you're able to find that connection, it has opened up an entire new perspective of donors.
I'm really glad you brought that up. And I also am glad you brought up that it is okay to say no. And people are like, well, I rejected a silent auction item or a live auction item. It's better to say no than say yes, and it goes for a really low dollar amount, and then that vendor's upset and they never work with you again. So you've got to look and make sure your audience is going to respond to it. And I've seen amazing packages go for really little amounts of money because they don't fit the audience that's in the room. So you really have to understand your audience. So I'm really glad you brought up the part about that it is okay to say, that it is okay to say no. And I want to turn back to Rick. And, you were talking a little bit about videos and highlighting, the organization. So I'd love for you, from an organization perspective, how do you do that balance? Because JDRF is a national and global organization. How do you balance highlighting the mission of a national organization while giving the event a local feel so that it feels uniquely Houston?
Yeah, and that's a great question. And I will say this conversation comes up a lot at our board level, right? How do we keep the field local, but knowing that we're supporting really a global organization? And first is we're very upfront with our donors, is that their dollars are going to fund the best research that's going to provide the best outcome in the shortest amount of time, wherever in the world that is. And so that might be in Israel, it might be in England, it might be in Philadelphia. Fortunately, we're funding 7 projects that are taking place here in the medical center to the tune of almost $4 million. It's coming back into our market, which is really important for a lot of Houstonians. Like they like to give, they like to know that some of this is coming back. Some of the work we're doing too is not just research, is we talked about earlier, that outreach and community engagement bucket. So the money we raise goes to help support that work as well. And that's all happening here locally around the greater Houston area. And so we just try to highlight that through our messaging, through the videos in the room, through our speakers. And then wherever we can, we'll pull in local, at least beneficiaries from the funds that we raise, to be able to come and share their stories. So some of them are in the room, some of them may be part of the videos that happen, or events after or before the gala. And so that's how we try to weave it out, right? We have one mission, global organization, but then here's how we're having impact right here in our backyard.
I love that how you were able to kind of translate dollars that are actually being reinvested into the Houston community from those funds, because that shows that the organization is serious about planting roots in the community. And that's, because there's lots of national organizations, they'll come in, they'll take their money, but it goes to the national cause and no one's really sure what exactly it's doing to benefit people on the ground. So I'm really glad you brought that piece up. One other piece, and I'd love for you to elaborate on this too, is selecting honorees. And I know every year the Promise Ball selects honorees. So share a little bit about how you all go about selecting the honorees for, for the Promise Ball each year.
Yeah, and I guess some of our chairs, you know, looking at who in our organization has really contributed in meaningful ways, not just financially, but time, talent, treasures and ties, right, to the organization, where we truly can honor somebody and not just put a title on them in hopes that they'll bring in dollars to our event. And so similar to chairs, just we continue to look at a working list of individuals that we think fit that criteria and prioritize based on years. And so sometimes it might be because of who the chair is and surfacing that person. And in some cases, it may be people, the chairs and honorees have only met once or twice, or maybe never. And we also want to make sure, from a fundraising standpoint, we'd like it if our chairs and honorees didn't run and live in the same circle, because we want to cast a wide net. And so I'm proud to say that every year our honorees are people that people in the crowd look at as, I want to aspire to that, right? I want to leave an impact and a mark in this organization just like they have. And so, because when they're up there on the stage, whether getting their flowers and their glass bowl, and sharing their comments, that their stories one that can motivate people and inspire people.
That was so well said. And I especially like the part of, you want to have people in slightly different circles, because you want to make sure to create that devoted following. And if you have kind of everyone in the same group, they may go just that one year and then you never see them again. And that's, that doesn't set up for long-term success. I love how you kind of framed how you do that, and how the honorees work, and it's good for them to be friendly but not best friends. I think that's a good model for people to go by, because you want synergy, but you don't necessarily want a closed circle either.
Exactly.
Thank you. And Allie, I know you've talked about, some of the things you want to do to leave your mark, but talk a little bit about, at a high level, what are some things guests could expect to experience when they walk into the ballroom this year at the Promise Ball?
Well, it is going to be super fun. We are so excited. It is going to be, as I said, very elevated and glamorous, and you're going to feel this energy in the room that you just really want to be part of. It's going to be fun. We have a bunch of surprises that I can't quite share yet, but there'll be a lot of action going on in there. But we'll certainly have our junior ambassadors, who are these amazing children and teens, boys and girls, that are our representatives. They are these beautiful children. They come out, they're dressed up, they look gorgeous, they're so strong. They're wearing their CGMs and their, insulin pods and different things. And just seeing them all together, it's, for me, I think, one of the most beautiful emotional piece, because at the end of the day, right, like, these children are what we're here for, and for them as they go into their adulthood, to be able to support them as well as the adults already. So that is a piece that will definitely be there. But there'll certainly be some unique experiences that we're really excited for.
I'm really glad you brought up the why and doing it effectively, because people will give if they know why they're there, because most people, if they're paying $500 or $1,000 for a ticket, or they're being a guest, there is, I don't want to say there's an expectation, but there is a high likelihood that those folks are going to give. And it's much easier for those folks to give when they understand the why, and having the kids be present to showcase, the technology and the treatments that they're using that they can just have on their person as a part of an everyday thing is a really powerful, powerful tool to do that. And I know it will be a super, super exciting event. And I know we're coming up on time here, so I always like ending with kind of a fun question. And with this one, Allie, I'd like you to go first, or Rick, I'd like you to go first, and Allie, I'd like you to have the last word. And that is, what advice would you give to someone looking to lead their first gala?
Yeah, well, so I'll answer, I guess, from the staffing standpoint, right? The person who's being paid to lead the charge, I guess, if you will. One is the team around you, right? I mean, I'm blessed to have amazing staff that work here. We don't have tons of staff, but we have some amazing staff who work tirelessly, and hopefully Allie will concur that the staff that are working with her they're accountable, they follow through, they're proactive, and they help her along the way, and at times may have to say that's a great idea, but maybe we can't do that this year, right? So just being able to be honest and open. So that would be one. Two is, to me, the no-brainer, right? It's without volunteers, we can't do what we do. And so, identifying and cultivating volunteers that we see who can help lead and partner with us in a productive way. And like I said earlier, we're just so fortunate that Allie and Rich are going to lead this year's gala. It is going to be successful, and it's going to be a lot of fun. And I can't wait for April 11th in the evening, when we're raising a toast to the great work and success that's come from that. But yeah, and so just that collaborative partnership between the two entities, and then probably the last thing I would just say is, we talked about it earlier, right? It's mission focused, but everybody in that room, is so important to us, and making sure that we're thinking and that we're stewarding for everything they do. It may be just buying a ticket, it may be buying an auction item, it may be raising their paddle at a really high level that night. But everybody's so important to the mission and the organization, and we want them to leave there feeling that way.
Amazing answer. And I'm really glad you gave a shout out to the volunteers, because it takes a village, and volunteers are so critical to making a fundraising event a success. You can have all the people in the world cutting big checks, but if you don't have the social and human capital behind it, it's not going to create a magical moment like the Promise Ball routinely is in Houston. So very well said. And Allie, you get the last word.
The last word. Okay, so to anyone who's interested or thinking about planning an event or starting an event, I would give this advice, a couple of pieces of advice. First is it's if you have a mission or a feeling that you want to do it, just do it. Like and you can come up with a million reasons why not to start something because it seems daunting, overwhelming, it's time consuming, there's a money aspect. But if you have a passion and a clear mission where you want that money to go, just do it and people will follow along. I mean, when I started Mahjong for a Cure, I guess it was in 2024, it was spring break for us and it was March. I was in California and I said, you know what? It just came to me like one night, I'm like, I'm going to create this event and I'm going to have to do it in 6 weeks because as we know, it come, May in Houston, schools let out, it's hot, people are busy with end of the year. So I had from middle of March to May 6th to create this entire event from start to finish. And I was just like, I'm going to do it. And I reached out, as I said, on social media, reached out to places and just keep moving ahead and know that that momentum, whatever you're doing, you're going to make mistakes. You're going to look back and say, why did I do that? But at the end goal, you're going to raise money. And if you show people a great time filled with gratitude, which I think is just, kind of what Rick was saying, that endless amount of appreciation and making everyone genuinely feel that their involvement is so well noted. And I really try to go above and beyond with that and send gifts after and flowers and just because it's genuinely how I feel, I would say, so just put it out there and you can refine for the next year and figure out what worked. And I'd also say from the minute I have an idea and inception, for me, it's all about the donor experience. I put myself in their shoes. I've been, on that side of it. And what would make me want to be part of this, feel appreciated, have a great time. You care so much about, the check-in everything should be smooth and they should just have a great night. So I think, and then the follow-up, I think if you keep all those things in play, you're going to have a successful event, especially when your mission is something that you're so passionate about.
Very well said. And I love the just do it. And you put together a highly successful event in 6 weeks. You learned. People are like, well, the event's not perfect. No event is perfect. There has not ever been a single event in all the history of humanity that's been a perfect event. So the just do it piece is a perfect piece of advice and a great note to end on. And Rick, Allie, you both were just fantastic guests today. I can't thank you both enough for being here.
Thank you so much for having us. This was really a treat for us.
Yeah, thanks, Rob. This has been great.
Absolutely. And the Houston Promise Ball, benefiting BreakThrough T1D, will be held on April 11th, 2026 at the Hilton Americas in Houston, Texas. For more information, please visit breakthrough-t1d.org/Southern Texas. And that will do it for this episode of Fun and Fundraising. I'm your host, Rob Giardinelli, reminding you to keep it fun, keep it interesting, and your guests will have a great time. Have a great day, everyone, and take care.